Hello and welcome to Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on YYC Business, brought to you by MegaPixx Media. Joining me today is Anne-Marie Lurie, who is Chief Economist for the Calgary Real Estate Board. Thanks for joining us today, Anne-Marie.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the most recent numbers the Real Estate Board put out regarding the MLS sales in the city in August. First, we'll look at the MLS, the actual sales themselves. 2151 units transacted during the month of August. That was up 37% from a year ago. 25% increase considering long-term averages. Tell me why we're continuing to see this demand for housing in Calgary with strong sales.
There's several reasons for it. I mean, first of all, we are still in a very low interest rate environment, which is encouraging sales activity. Another thing that we can't forget is that through the pandemic, while some people were impacted, there's also been a lot of people out there who have really increased their savings. And I think that what we're also seeing is that, people now that they maybe have more money for a down payment or things like that, are translating into the housing market as well. So some of them are using that money that they saved up and putting it into their homes. So I think that's also another factor to consider. And also keep in mind that because the market was so tight earlier in the year, so there wasn't a lot of supply choice, I think people who did not have an opportunity to potentially get in the market then, they're now seeing more options in the market and they're getting in now. So a bit of it is also pulling forward or pulling back from the demand that, people who just couldn't potentially get into the market earlier. Okay,
now when you look at the benchmark price for the overall residential real estate industry here, 459,600 is the benchmark price for August. That was up 9%, a very healthy 9% from a year ago. Why have we seen such a good, strong increase in the price?
The main reason has been because there hasn't been a lot of supply. So the challenge that we've had, and again, most of that's driven by the detached side of the market. Let's point that out, because you don't have those price gains for apartment condos, that's for sure. Yeah. But what we're generally seeing is that supply level hasn't come up fast enough to meet this demand. And what that's done is it's essentially created what we like to call a seller's market conditions, and it's caused some of those really strong price gains in the market.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've talked a little bit here about inventory and listings for sale. At the end of the month, there was just over 6,000 homes on the market, still about 7% down from a year ago. And I imagine a year ago probably wasn't that high as well, considering the pandemic and where we're at. So, any positive signs of that inventory may be climbing soon, or?
Well, we had thought that inventory numbers would be a little stronger now than they were, but we haven't seen it because that demand still remains really strong based off of the listings that are coming in the market. So I think that the supply adjustment, especially in the Calgary market, has been a bit slower than people thought. And it just points to the fact that demand has remained so strong going even into the fall. I think to see that shift, we are still seeing listings coming on, and I'm always watching how many listings are coming on relative to the sales in the market. We are starting to see some signs of improvements in those ratios. But at the same time, it's just there hasn't been necessarily enough supply coming on yet. Now, as we move forward and all that demand starts to get filled essentially, then the expectation is we should start to see at least some of those supply levels match better with the demand.
Yeah, and just before we got online here, Anne-Marie, I looked up the Calgary Real Estate Board's website, and for those who don't know, there's some daily housing summary on there that shows the statistics for the market so far this month. So, into 10 days into this month, sales have increased by 30% compared to a year ago for the same time period. So obviously the demand continues. Do you foresee that demand continuing for the rest of this year?
Well, we do expect to see strong demand through the remainder of this year. Now, yeah, so that was an expectation. We would still see strong demand. Now, I didn't expect it necessarily at the same levels of what we saw earlier in the year. And I think that growth is showing signs of at least not growing as much as what we had, but still it's an exceptional level of sales. And I do expect that, we will be, far above longer term averages right through till the end of the year.
Yeah. And actually, today, earlier today, Statistics Canada came out with its labor force survey showing, some positive signs in employment growth for the Calgary region. That's got to bode well for the housing market, isn't it?
It does, especially on longer term, because when we think about all of the activity we've seen, we know a lot of it, there's been a lot of pent up demand in the market, but to contain and to continue to see demand, you need to see those fundamentals come in line. And what's been very positive in terms of our employment numbers is we're seeing gains in areas that are typically higher paid professions, right? So that actually does sit very well in terms of longer term prospects for our housing market.
Okay, super. Thanks very much for joining us again today, Anne-Marie.
Thank you.
Okay, that was Anne-Marie Lurie, who is Chief Economist with the Calgary Real Estate Board. This has been Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on YYC Business, brought to you by MegaPixx Media.